Good morning, everyone. I'm Angela Davis, and today I am at Roseville Area High School with a bunch of teachers and students. Hello, everybody. It's so wonderful to see your faces. We're here today for a North Star Journey Live conversation about the new ethnic studies component that was just added to the revised social studies standards for the state of Minnesota. A framework for those benchmarks is still in process of rolling out, but there are some districts ahead of the game. Minneapolis and St. Paul Public Schools started teaching ethnic studies classes last year, and other schools like Roseville, where we are today, have had ethnic studies style classes in place for even longer. So today we are talking to teachers and we're talking to students who are already doing ethnic studies at their schools with the goal of imagining what the future might look like as ethnic studies rolls out across the entire state of Minnesota. So first up, we have our educators. Let me introduce our panel. We have three teachers from the Roseville Area High School Social Studies cohort here with us today. We have Marley Mfalagunde. Hey, Marley, nice to meet you.
Hi.
Hi. And next to her, we have James Darwillow. Hi, James.
Hey, how you doing?
Good morning. And Amy Westland is with us. Welcome, Amy.
Hi.
Hello. We also have with us more teachers. We have Kong Vang here. Kong, who is here from St. Paul, from Washington Technology Magnet High School in St. Paul. Hey, Kong.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Hi, thank you for being here. And Alicia Montserrate is here from Exploration High School in Minneapolis, in Northeast Minneapolis, a charter school. Hi, Alicia.
Hi.
Hi. And next to her, we have Natalia Benjamin, who drove all the way from Rochester here to Roseville to be with us today. Natalia is the Director of Multilingual Learning for all of Rochester Public Schools, but previously she was a teacher to English learners at Century High School there in Rochester. And you may also know her name because Natalia was the Minnesota Teacher of the Year in 2021. So nice to have you here and to see you again, Natalia.
Pleasure being here.
All right, so I want to start by first explaining a little bit about the difference between the new state standards and the ethnic studies requirements at, say, St. Paul Public Schools. The ethnic studies strand that has been added to the Minnesota Social Studies standards applies to all students, K through 12, and it will roll out in the 2026-27 school year. It incorporates ethnic studies concepts across disciplines. It also requires that high schools offer an ethnic studies style class, but it is not mandatory, and that means that students don't have to take it. By contrast, in St. Paul and in Minneapolis Public Schools, a class called Ethnic Studies has been added to every high school and is now required for students to graduate. I think, does that sound kind of right to everybody? That's sort of the ground rules here. So, Kong, you teach that required class at Washington Technology Magnet, which is, again, a St. Paul public school. When did you start teaching ethnic studies, and what was going on at that time when it started there?
Yeah, we started teaching in the fall of 2022 when it first became a requirement. There were some pilot courses that happened the previous school year. Yeah, I mean, the framework of how we're doing it in St. Paul is that we have 4 units. It starts with the birth of ethnic studies and learning about identities, and then we go on to systems of oppression, then move into healing and liberation, and a final project. And the way my classroom, how I really stress in my classroom is our students' ability to tell their stories. So thank you for having me here. I keep emphasizing that with my students, so I want to share this with the listeners out there too, is that validating and learning and telling your stories are so important because we're the best people to tell our own stories because if we don't tell our story, we are in danger of accepting what others have to say about us, and it might not be what we really want. And so every day I'm having students greet and tell their stories.
So when I looked at the district website for a description of ethnic studies, I saw a nice description that talked about focusing on identity and heritage and culture in communities, and with an emphasis on lived experience, something we do a lot on my talk show, particularly of people of color across the U.S., and also looking at the relationship between power structures with a focus on inequalities. Are young people, curious about these kinds of things? Have you seen there's a lot of curiosity among students?
Yeah, I think they lived it, but they've never had like the framework of how it's being applied to them and or the language to like use to kind of understand that this is happening to them. So one thing I think a lot of students realize is they didn't realize how much they needed this course after they have taken this course. And now that they have the vocabulary to use and understand what they're going through.
And they must feel very validated having their stories focused on and told.
Yes, yes. Again, like I think for communities of color, we have gone so long not hearing our stories, not seeing our holidays celebrated at Walmart or Target, and we're just so used to it. But at the subconscious level, what's sad is that I think we've kind of learned that maybe we don't matter, and I think it really takes a toll on kind of like their identity as they try to soul search and have a better grounding of who they are. And that's what I try to do in my class is that on day one, I tell them, you already hold the answer key to this class. You are the textbook of this classroom. Your stories and your lived experience is what this class is about. We could read articles, we could look at other things, but really the rigor in this classroom is us engaging in each other and learning from each other.
Alicia, you also teach ethnic studies at a charter school in Minneapolis, Exploration High School. It's not actually a required class there yet, but how does it look in your classroom? What's going on in your classroom?
Yeah, so Exploration is a hands-on project-based school, and all of our projects connect to the community in some way, shape, or form. So I just started teaching ethnic studies this school year, and we just finished our first quarter. And we focused on the standard of resistance and analyzing social movements, methods of change. So we actually kicked off quarter three, the first quarter of ethnic studies, with analyzing the education system and the need for reform. So we did a mini project looking at education reform and focusing on the educational experiences of various marginalized or essential communities, which was really cool and eye-opening. And I think similarly, like being able to put the name to the things that they have been experiencing and being able to look at the system of education and say, okay, well, this is what's happened to me, or this is my experience. Being able to name it has been really empowering, I think, for a lot of my students. And then the final project that we did for that quarter, they all chose a social movement, and they had to create a museum exhibit. So each student made a museum exhibit with 3 unique artifacts to capture the essence of the past related to that movement, the present, and then envisioning the future and what the future might look like.
You used the word empowering, and so do you find your students are eager to share their own stories and what they know about their own families, of what they've seen in their own neighborhoods?
Yeah. We right away started with just a brief reading of all of the controversy that was surrounding ethnic studies. And after doing that, it almost seemed like they felt like they were in on some kind of secret. Like they were excited to get the content because it's something that they haven't been given, and
Right.
something that they're all ready for because, like it was named, that they're all living
Right.
these experiences in their own lives. So why not call it out and talk about it?
I know they are eager to educate their fellow classmates, right?
Yeah.
So the discussions, I imagine, are pretty lively.
Yeah. We have great conversations. We like to talk a lot in my class. It's never quiet. So yeah, it's been good.
Some of your students are here. I see them nodding. They're
Yeah.
like, mhm. All right. Well, we're recording at Roseville Area High School, so let's talk to some Roseville teachers who are here, seated next to you guys. Amy, you are the curriculum leader for the Social Studies Department here at Roseville. Tell me the background of how these classes got their start here.
Sure. We have been doing for as long as I've been here, so over a decade, what we called our absented narrative work, which really aligns with the idea of ethnic studies. It's not just stories left out, it's stories that were purposely left out. That's why we added the ED to the absent. So we have been working really hard to incorporate those ideas into all of our social studies classes, to include all of the stories to get a more complete picture, whether it's American history classes or sociology classes or government classes, just to get more stories that have been absented, that have been pulled out of our classes. About 7 years ago, we changed our American history course to be called American Histories, plural, so that we were purposely including more stories from more groups of people. And we added our United States history through an African American lens course. We have a history uncensored course, which focuses on oral history and stories that aren't written down to share. And we've also really focused on co-construction, that the students help decide what stories we focus on within each course.
And I have in my notes here, Amy, that many students were really shaken and affected by the death of Philando Castile back in 2016, a Black man who died after a traffic stop, shot and killed by a police officer. So tell me, what were those conversations like after that?
We talked about that in every course. I mean, not just social studies, but we brought those.
It happened not very far from here. I should put that in the context, yeah.
Yeah, and we made sure to address that in a very present context of what that's looking like, and giving students, like all of you said, the vocabulary to really talk about that and process it and discuss it. And we also made lots of connections to our curriculum, to the past of how we got to this point.
And so have you found that students, again, this question, are they eager to talk about it, to have a place, to have like a structured conversation, to have assignments around these themes?
Absolutely. When they can when they can make connections from history to today and to their stories, when they see themselves in our curriculum, is the most powerful thing to get them engaged in what we're doing.
And Marley, you helped launch U.S. history through an African American lens, that class. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so that same year after Philando Castile's murder, students had organized a walkout advocating for more inclusive curriculum, and one of their demands was an African American history course. So me and another teacher went to our department, and with the support of our department, started the U.S. history through an African American, we call it USTAL for short because it's so long, started the course, got the grant so we could go out to the museum in DC and start building the curriculum for the students based on what they wanted and what they needed, that co-construction piece. And then the course has been around ever since.
So tell me, how do you describe when someone asks you this? So what's the difference in a U.S. history course and a U.S. history course through an African American lens? What are we talking about?
So USTAL, it's U.S. history, but we solely look at the African American perspective. So we start in 1619 when the first slaves are brought over and work our way up to as modern as possible, but also pull in as many current events as possible. But when it comes to, like, for example, the Revolution, we're not focusing on the battles. We're focusing on why did African Americans fight for either side or neither side. When we get to the Civil War, it's about the causes, but also who fought on what side. What was it like for African Americans, for Black people at that time? So it's less about the white story and more about the Black story, and trying to bring in as many other stories as we can as well, but really focusing on those personal narratives of African Americans and Black people who lived through it.
And what's the feedback from students? Are some of them surprised, like, I've never heard this before, or some of them like,
Yeah, it's kind of like a mix. We have students who are like, ooh, I've heard that before, but we have plenty of students, Black, brown students, who are like, no, I've never heard that story or that perspective before. So getting to hear parts of their history that they never knew before, and then things that we didn't know that they knew, we can also pull in as well. So it's kind of a mix, students who knew things and students who didn't.
And James, tell me about the class that you teach here at Roseville, and how has it gone for you?
Yeah, I teach U.S. history through an African American lens as well. It's my first year teaching this course. It is my 8th year here at Roseville. I had huge shoes to fill after Amy Liga, who started the class with Ms. Mfalangundi after she left to get her doctorate at the University of Minnesota. And so I'm coming in from special education world, but had a huge interest in this field before, and also drawing straight lines, helping to draw direct lines for our students through the African American lens from past history to present.
And what have you seen in terms of the response from the students in your class?
I've seen huge growth and interest. Like, they are really, really astute on the history, but also thinking about politics and how the politics and laws that are made, how they come about. Right now, we're studying Reconstruction, and it's one thing to think about Reconstruction as just the time period where the the Union was put back together after the Civil War. But I think the biggest thing that they're finding out is that there are laws that were put into place during that time period that really affected African American lives, right? It wasn't just about the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment, but it was about how those things affected African Americans as well.
And you personally, as an African American man who's a teacher, what is it like for you to have the opportunity to teach a class like this?
It's tremendous. It's tremendous to be able to share those experiences, those personal experiences, and then some of the past histories. Originally, I'm from New Orleans, Louisiana, and what that does is I grew up thinking about this stuff and learning about all this history, and then having some of this taught to me at a younger age. And so I'm glad to share some of the experiences that I've had and some of the learning that I've had.
I'm imagining some uncomfortable moments in class. Are there uncomfortable moments?
Oh, without a doubt, and Ms. Mfalangani could speak to that as well. But I think that within some of those uncomfortable moments comes some of the best learning as well.
Marla, you're nodding. Tell me about the uncomfortable moments.
Uncomfortable moments. Sometimes you block those because they are so uncomfortable, but it does come up with like a lot of growth where students had opinions coming into something, but then their opinions changing or their perspective changing. When you talk about certain things, I can't think of a specific example right now in this moment, but getting into not necessarily like debates, but questions of how would you react in that situation? How did they react in that situation? And how does the history around that impact how you would have reacted in that situation?
James?
Yeah, can I jump in? I think towards that, I think there's importance of letting kids know that, like, the African Americans, we are not a monolith. We don't all think alike. And so having some of those differing viewpoints, like if we're debating like the merits of like Martin Luther King's work versus Malcolm X, or the thinking of like a Du Bois versus Booker T. Washington, that is noted, right? So we don't all think alike. We don't all have the same opinions on things, but we have differing opinions and ways to get to the curriculum and the learning with that.
I'm imagining them also in studying history, seeing connections to what's happening currently.
Absolutely.
Right. That has to also be empowering, another word we get back to. Amy, a common criticism of ethnic studies is that it's not just information, it's indoctrination. Do you see students feeling some kind of way, feeling guilty or burdened by these kinds of lessons and these uncomfortable moments?
Actually, I don't see a lot of that. I think most of our students come eager to learn about the situation, and they're there to ask questions and find out more. And yes, we do end up having the uncomfortable conversations where maybe they didn't know about this, so they're learning it for the first time, or opinions differ among students and within groups and outside of groups of students. But I see it more as they want to learn that. That is why Ushtal has grown in popularity, is students want to learn those stories. Our History Uncensored course has grown, our Sociology, Race, Class, and Gender, like they want to take those courses because they want to have those conversations and learn why things are in history and why things are the way they are today.
You caught my attention with the names of some of the courses. Could you tell me those two names again of those classes you just mentioned?
History Uncensored and Sociology of Race, Class, and Gender.
Those sound like college classes, right? You think the students, again, they're equipped by the time, they're in ninth grade in particular, they're ready to have a structured way to have these conversations?
I think it depends on the course. Our History Uncensored course is offered to 9th through 12th graders, so we structure it that way to kind of scaffold for 9th graders up to seniors. Race, Class, and Gender is a junior-senior course, so we wait for them to be a little bit more mature and have those conversations.
And I bet they've been through some things by that time too.
Yeah,
Again,
absolutely.
that lived experience that Congress speaking of. Natalia, you're an educator in Rochester, outside of the metro. So tell me your story. How did you get involved with teaching an ethnic studies class?
Yeah, I came to the ethnic studies world through my work with heritage speakers, and that was my entry point into really centering students' lived experiences. We've talked about storytelling, systems of power and oppression, and so I started doing that work in my classes with English learners just to have an avenue to build positive identities, to build that language, to really describe our experiences as diverse language speakers, and really to analyze the systems at play that racialize a lot of their experiences. And so when Rochester started their ethnic studies course about 4 years ago, then I was eager to join the team of teachers that were teaching ethnic studies because I really believe in the power of centering our students in our curriculum and building it around their lived experiences and providing an opportunity for them to have a voice.
And I should mention, you grew up in Guatemala and Nicaragua, and you speak many languages. And what have you seen in some of your students who are also immigrants, and what they are expressing, like what they need in their school experience?
Yeah, so I think one important part of ethnic studies is building that criticality. So allowing students to have the frameworks to understand what's going on in a specific situation. So people that speak English in diverse ways often are racialized because of our accent or the words that we use. And without really understanding the attitudes towards language, oftentimes students tend to internalize those messages of, I'm not enough, or my language is not valued, or I should hide part of my identity so that I can fit in. And so we actually studied language orientations, which is a framework that Richard Rees published in 1986. And that helps students understand that language can be viewed as a resource, but there's also language rights, but there's also negative attitudes towards language differences. And so by doing that and then telling our stories and analyzing the power structures around different experiences, students are able to name that their experiences are not because of who they are, but because of the systems that deem certain languages better than others. And so that's, I think, the foundation for students to do that. And as we have those conversations there, they often feel great pride in who they are. And instead of putting their heads down, they start to just having that positive identity, and they start to be able to name some of the experiences that otherwise wouldn't come to light. They don't often have spaces where they can talk about their lived experiences as immigrants and diverse language speakers.
Right. And the ethnic studies class that you taught at Rochester wasn't required. So students who took it, they signed up for it by choice. But did you hear some negative feedback in your community as you all were launching this and starting to teach these classes?
I actually was very, very supportive messages from the parents of the students that took the class and from students themselves. And it was great. And I think as our students worked on their projects, we were directly related to their lived experiences as teenagers in the high school. It was positive to be able to see them take on problems that they wanted to solve and really explore the whys and to be able to think of solutions to those problems.
Kang, you sort of mentioned healing is a core part of your critical ethnic studies class in St. Paul. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, I know earlier you mentioned, what are some of the criticism, and when I do hear criticism from family, I direct them to our 7 principles of critical ethnic studies, and I'll mention the top 3. And the first one is self-love, there's honor, and community. And I think if we can get people who are on the fence about critical ethnic studies or are, critical about it, like, I don't know if I want this for my children, I really emphasize the idea of self-love and honoring our communities and just and the healing aspect. My classroom is a space of healing because I teach in a neighborhood where it's very ethnically diverse and many multifamily housing projects. And when you put hurt people next to hurt people, we need a space for healing. And so as much as I can, I try to create that space. And I know earlier you alluded to hard conversations in the classroom. And knowing that that will happen in my class, I teach a lesson on respectful conversation. And I mentioned earlier, the hardest part of my class is being engaged with each other. It's not my written exams, it's not my final project. It's really be fully engaged and actively listening to each other and respecting each other's conversation. Because when students become vulnerable, the last thing you want to see happen is the table mate next door just on their phones and not listening, right? And so this is a space for healing. There's a lot of, I teach in a school where like over 75% of my students are either first or second generation Americans. And so getting them, providing the context of the civil rights movement and slavery, all that is hard. You got to really front load that. Because they don't have that background information. So I cover a little bit of that, but also really working on letting them tell their stories so that they could heal. Because how I came into this is that I was a lost college student who was not doing very well. And it wasn't until I took a couple of Asian American and African American studies courses where like I really understood, oh my goodness, our voices have been excluded from policymaking and our narratives have been pushed to the side. And it wasn't until I had a better sense and grounding of who I was and my own identity that I was able to really advocate for myself. So that's what I want for my students, to heal and really have a grounding of who they are.
And Alicia, are there some moments that you've had in class too where you've seen these like aha moments or healing or just, sitting even in that discomfort, but recognizing that like this moment may play a pivotal, role in someone's development in their education and even how they view themselves? Are there just some moments that have been special to you that make you feel like we're on the right path by pursuing this?
Yeah, definitely. I think just the fact that our school is as small as it is, there is a special level of comfort and vulnerability kind of baked in just because we all know each other so well. But especially early on in the quarter, just the excitement. The students were excited to come to class. They were excited to learn the content, and the conversations definitely got kicked up a notch compared to when I was teaching geography. We can have great conversations in geography, but the content is just significantly different, and ethnic studies content does allow for those more vulnerable conversations. We use similar ethnic studies principles where we are focusing on like how can we show self-love, how do we like honor each other in this space and those who have done this work before us. So it kind of inherently opens up that space for just like really wholesome conversations, sometimes hard, but always valuable.
And Natalia, a key point of ethnic studies is the fact that it can help close the education gap between students of color and white students. And, that has been a challenge for decades here in Minnesota, this gap in education. So do you think that ethnic studies, is this going to be a key way to get students involved in this?
Wow, that's a really good question. I think that there's really good things about ethnic studies. One is it allows for student engagement and student voice. And I think those are principles that can be used in any classroom. I think it would be really hard to say one ethnic studies class during 1 year of a students will make or change everything in a system that doesn't always work for students. But I think the principles that ethnic studies has can help our students to have a more level playing field, because all of a sudden now we're talking about things that they can connect to more easily. When their voices are emphasized and their histories are present, there is power that comes with that. And so I think that is something that can definitely help to level the playing field and move towards better outcomes for all students.
Well, to our teachers, to our educators, thank you for taking us inside your classrooms and inside of your schools to give us your perspectives, what you're seeing. And now we're going to bring up some students next. But first, I want to thank our teachers again. Thank you for your time. We've been talking with Natalia Benjamin, the Director of Multilingual Learning at Rochester Public Schools, Alicia Monserrate, a teacher at Exploration High School in Minneapolis, Kang Vang, a teacher at Washington Technology Magnet School in St. Paul, and from Roseville Area High School, where we are today, Amy Westland, James Dawolo, and Marley Mfalagundi. Let's show them some love, students. Thank you. Okay, while we transition here, I want to take you to the classroom of a teacher named Kimberly Colbert, who teaches critical ethnic studies at St. Paul's Central High School. We have a video to share.
Let your community figure it out. You have to go all the way down and all the way back, staying in a line and staying on top of the chairs. I'm Kimberly Colbert. I teach critical ethnic studies and African American literature at Central High School in St. Paul. So critical ethnic studies is based on 7 different principles. And these principles are the foundation for what students learn, for how they center some of their writing and some of their work in the class.
And in critical ethnic studies, we do a lot of interactive activities like that. Makes it better.
How did it feel being in community?
You get to see like things that aren't really taught, like including like minorities and like other ethnicities that aren't just like taught about enough. It's like very important to like know about other perspectives and like the way they also view the world.
We watched like a poetry video and how like different ideas can be brought to you. Like for example, like somebody assuming something about someone without actually knowing them first. Like judging a book by its cover, basically.
I like the fact that we are teaching something that is really important, something that really is interrupting the parts of our public education system that are, quite frankly, racist and restrictive and narrow. And we're opening it up to all kinds of opinions, all kinds of lenses and narratives, and really teaching information that students have not received in the past. I have parents come for conferences saying, I never had a class like this. I really wish that I had. So I really like teaching that, teaching all of that. And I learn. I don't know everything. And so I learn a lot.
On to the students. We are thrilled that we have a bunch of students here today who were willing to leave class to be with us. So thank you. And we're going to hear them tell us what they think about ethnic studies, because I know that they will tell us for themselves what they are really feeling about this, and we'll get to see what's on their minds. Let me introduce them. We have with us Jalela McCoy, a student of Alicia Monserrate at Exploration High School in Minneapolis. Hi, Jalela.
Hi.
Hi, nice to meet you. And we also have Ethan View here. Ethan is a student at Spring Lake Park High School. Welcome, Ethan.
Good afternoon.
Hi. And next to Ethan, we have Jackie Lee from Great River School in St. Paul. Hey, Jackie.
Hey.
Hey. Ethan and Jackie, by the way, played a role in getting ethnic studies added to the social studies standard, as we will hear from them. We also have a couple of students from Roseville Area High School from inside this building with us. Evelyn Segor is here. Is it Segor?
Segor.
Evelyn, nice to meet you.
Hi.
Hi. And next to Evelyn is Madison Lowe. We're glad to have you here, Madison.
Thank you for having me.
Hi. So let's start with you, Evelyn and Madison. What ethnic studies style classes have you taken here at Roseville High School, and how do you describe them? Why did you want to take these classes? Evelyn, you go first.
I took sociology, race, class, and gender, which I know Miss Westland talked about earlier. I took that class because I'd taken her Sociology 1 class, which was just basics, and I was really excited to learn more about what we learned in that class.
And what you learned, did it make you upset or happy, or what did it do for you?
I don't think it made me upset. I think I learned a lot, and I think my perspective shifted a lot throughout that class. We focused a lot on like the intersectionality of all those issues because it was like race, class, and gender, not just ethnic studies. And I think that was one of the most valuable things I learned.
And did you find you had some personal stories to share? You had some personal lived experience that added to the conversation that you could contribute?
I think, yes, and I think that everyone in that class did. It was very like conversation based. We had Socratic seminars and things, so there was a lot of like lived experiences shared.
You heard me talking to the teachers about uncomfortable moments. Any moments that stick out in your mind that you're like, oh, but it was okay?
I mean, there's no like one story that I have in mind, but there were some uncomfortable moments in that class. There were some things that like a lot of people had to face, but nothing ever felt so uncomfortable we couldn't handle it. We always
like Miss Westland gave a disclaimer at the beginning of the class that it was really important that we're going to be uncomfortable sometimes and we're going to stick through and work through those uncomfortable moments. And that framework really helped it not go badly.
Good. And Madison, what about you? What ethnic studies style classes have you taken here at Roseville?
Like Evelyn, we were actually in the same sociology, race, class, and gender class, which was, like Ms. Westland said, it was a combined class with juniors and seniors. I really enjoyed that class, and like Evelyn said, there was a lot of lived experiences being told and stories, and I think that sort of built a sense of community for everyone that oh, we can relate to each other about certain issues, and we even got to pick the topics that we learned about, actually. So we got to pick the different subtopics within race, class, and gender. And then at the end of each unit, we also had to research a current event, like a current event about race, a current event about gender, current event about class. And that kind of forced students to kind of figure out for themselves, what's going on in the world, which I think was a really great way to inform ourselves as students.
And were you surprised by how some of the current events that we're seeing now, how they so closely connect to what we've seen in the past?
Yeah, it's very prevalent to our current events, and it's interesting to make that connection, even as the new generation.
Did you find that you or your classmates were people ever embarrassed or reluctant to share personal stories, or did it sometimes surprise you, I can't believe this person shared this?
I thought Miss Westland did a fantastic job at creating such a safe and comfortable place where everyone could just talk.
And what do you think, to each of you, what do you think you learned that will really stick with you as you move through the next phase of life as young adults? Do you think there was some just value of having an opportunity to have a class that focused on race, class, and gender? Madison?
I think being able to, as a young person of color, I think it was so important and crucial for me to see myself in our curriculum, which I had never seen that before until I entered, because I also took History Uncensored my sophomore year. So it wasn't until my sophomore year where I was learning stories about people that look like me or women too. So I think that I'll always take with me, that I was so blessed to have the experience of being able to see myself in the curriculum.
And that didn't happen until 10th grade?
No, it didn't.
And then what about you, Evelyn?
One of the things I'll take with me from this class throughout my life is the skills that I learned and the ways that it trained me to look critically into things and to understand that there's always something deeper going on behind. A lot of the things we learned in that class are how systems were set up to disadvantage certain people, and I think that way of thinking is going to be really important throughout my life.
And Jalila, what about you? You're taking ethnic studies a class right now there at Exploration High School in Minneapolis. How's it going?
It's great.
What's the name of your class that you're taking?
Ethnic studies, yeah.
So what kinds of topics, have you been talking about this school year?
Last quarter, we just finished talking about a social movement of our choice and connecting the 7 principles to our artifacts. And right now we're talking about our identities and intersectionality and how that works.
I love how intersectionality just rolls off your tongues. I used to have to practice that word. How does that class feel different than some of the other classes you're taking?
See, that's why I really like this class, because we talk about topics that you wouldn't normally talk about in your typical 4 core classes. I just think this class is a eye-opener class, and it just brings people together. So I really like it.
It's now. It's meeting you now and maybe how you're living your life. It's a little bit different than some other classes.
Yeah. I don't know.
What do you think about it? That more students will have an opportunity to take a class like this. That statewide that this will get spread.
So what would I tell other people?
Or what do you think is good about it? Or what would you want a student who's never had an ethnic studies class? What would you say to them?
I think this class is good because, like I said, it's an eye-opener class, but I don't know, it just educates you.
It makes you excited about learning, it seems like. You're smiling, right?
I don't know, I really like the class. It's just great.
That's good. We like to hear that when students like classes. And Ethan and Jackie, I want to bring you in. You were both involved with the Youth for Ethnic Studies Coalition. Ethan, describe what that is, the Youth for Ethnic Studies Coalition. What is that?
Yeah, so then the Youth for Ethnic Studies Coalition is a group of students, young students, like high school students and young college students, and we all come together and work to like advocate for ethnic studies. And so I joined Y4ES, that's the acronym, in my sophomore year in high school, and I joined, it was during the pandemic, and so it was virtual meetings, and I joined at a time where the coalition was working on a presentation for the college and university faculty assembly conference. And I joined, and I was just learning about ethnic studies at that time. And so a little background about my high school experience or education experience in general, I didn't have ethnic studies. And so hearing from the students behind me about their ethnic studies class really brightens up my face. And it's just like, for future generations, it makes me happy. And
So you're at Spring Lake Park High School.
Spring Lake Park High School.
Why was this so important to you, for you? Because it seems a little intimidating, because you're talking about getting together with other students, but creating presentations for adults or maybe even, state legislators as well? That seems a little intimidating.
Yeah, it can be intimidating. And I think my experience prior to joining Y4ES, I was with the Asian American Organizing Project, and there I went through a summer program with them and learning about social justice and different types of justices and using our voice to advocate for the Asian community. And I think that really set me up to work with Y4ES and help contribute any way possible in my capacity in the presentation. And in the end, I was a co-keynote speaker at that conference, just letting them know about what ethnic studies is and what the positive impacts it can have on students. And
how do you describe what's the positive impact? I mean, like, why is it important? What do you think it's going to do to help young people who are trying to figure out the world?
Yeah, for my experience, I didn't see myself like a Hmong American in my textbook, and just that exclusion, like, kind of makes me feel like, oh, am I not part of the classroom? Like in my freshman year, it was just lots of reading in my social studies class of other communities. And great, these are great communities, but what about my community? I'd love to learn more about where I come from.
And to have your classmates learn as well.
And as much as and there are other communities out there that are not part of the textbook. And I think before we can connect with our education, I think it's really important to connect, especially with ourselves and community. And that joining these organizations like the Asian American Organizing Project and Y4ES, that was my substitution of ethnic studies and grounding myself, getting to know more about my community and other communities out there. It really grounded me during this whole process of advocating for ethnic studies.
What is your story, Jackie, about why you wanted to be part of the Youth for Ethnic Studies Coalition? Why was this so important to you?
Very similar to Ethan, actually. I joined Y4ES officially around when I gave my testimony to state legislators, which was a very nerve-wracking first time joining, but it went pretty well, I'd like to think. But I joined really because, again, I didn't really see any Asian American representation, especially Southeast Asian representation, in my history books and what I learned. I'm lucky enough, though, to go to a school that I got to learn a lot about, especially indigenous movements and marginalized groups that have often, most people don't have the privilege of learning about all of these different movements and kind of fights for against white colonialism and colonization. And it especially was very important for me as I'm an older sister. I have a younger sister, and I really wanted to make sure that she saw herself properly represented in what she was learning, because quite frankly, I think history is such an important tool for informing exactly what our perspectives and how we view the world and what policies come into that world. And especially during 2020 to 2021, 2022, you saw an uptick of anti-Asian hate crimes. And I saw that barely getting represented, not only just in my school conversations, but also in the media, in the news. And I thought that was just incredibly, it very much impacted how I felt about, oh, my grandparents can't even go out on the street without getting called a racial slur, getting spit at and called a virus. But even that's not getting represented properly.
So there's harm that comes from having stories excluded.
Yes, very much so, I believe, yes.
And you're at Great River in St. Paul, and that is a charter school.
It is a charter school.
Does your school offer ethnic studies?
The interesting thing about my Great River is that we have it very much emphasizes the power of marginalized communities and movements. So I never had an official ethnic studies course, but I was essentially learning ethnic studies curriculum all throughout from my middle school to into my high school's year. I've been at Great River since I was in 6th grade all the way to in my senior year currently. But I took a ethnic studies course voluntarily as an elective in my sophomore year, and a lot of that was kind of echoed by what the teachers had said before on the former panel, but kind of learning about the history of ethnic studies, and specifically in the realm of schooling, like land schools, and especially with like indigenous reservation schools and that movement and the harm with that. And then on to Brown v. Board, and also Lau v. Nichols, which is a huge case for ELL and ESL. Very much impacted me because I was a former ELL, ESL student. So, but yeah, we haven't offered an ethnic studies course since I believe last year, but I believe it's coming back, which is really great.
All right, I have a final question I want to ask each of you. Same question. Critics of ethnic studies classes are often very vocal about the fact that they worry that it will further divide students in an already very divisive time, and that it somehow that it indoctrinates or encourages activism. What would you say to that? What would you say to someone who is just worried that these type of classes will do more harm than good, from what you've seen, what you've experienced? And I'm just going to go around. I'm going to start with you, Madison, and you go to Roseville Area High School.
Correct.
Yeah.
I would say it does more good than harm, 100%. I think people that are worried about it dividing people are completely off base. I think it brings people together more than divide people. I think that ethnic studies does a great job at connecting all of us, and hearing each other's stories and lived experiences is so important for us to grow as a community and as a society. And I don't know, I think that everyone should consider, because currently at Roseville, it's not a graduation requirement. So people that are taking the ethnic studies classes, it's because they choose those classes. And I think everyone could benefit from choosing those classes. Since we live in such a diverse state and we go to such a diverse school, I think it's important to learn about each other's stories. And yeah, I definitely think that it brings us together rather than divides us.
Evelyn, also a student here at Roseville High School.
Yeah, I agree with Madison 100%. I think that I would even say by thinking that these classes are going to divide students further, you're selling the students short. Everyone who's taken these classes that I know has loved them and has wanted to take more. And I think that we have the ability to learn these things. Education is a tool for us, and you get to choose what you do with your education. So no, I don't think that educating people more on this in any way is going to hurt them.
Jalela, you're there at Exploration High School in Minneapolis. What would you say to someone who worries that these classes will somehow do more harm than good?
I also agree that ethnic studies brings people together because you get to learn about different cultures, experiences, and it just helps you build that understanding and bond with the people you're around. So it makes us more culturally connected.
And
I like it.
Future coworkers, future neighbors, you're going to need those skills. Ethan, you're a PSEO student. Because those classes are not offered at your at Spring Lake Park High School, what do you want people to know about the classes you've been able to take, but you had to go outside the school to take them?
I think it shouldn't have to be that way. I think education, like the saying goes, it helps you prepare for the real world, but how can we prepare when our textbooks excludes the world? And to include them is to better equip us students to better the world.
Where are you taking your classes, your post-secondary education?
So I'm taking my classes at both Minneapolis College and the University of Minnesota, Twin Cities.
And finally, Jackie, there at Great River School in St. Paul, what do you want people to know?
I think it was really interesting when I heard that, activism is a bad thing. I think that when we fight back is when we really make the change. And ultimately, I think our voices are so important now more than ever. And we really do form the landscape of what our world will be, for not only just our younger brothers, younger sisters, but future, their kids and the kids after that. And I think it's just so powerful to be able to learn all these histories and be able to get all these perspectives. And ultimately, you can form just a better world, a better society.
All right, well, thank you to all of our students. And I feel so good knowing that you guys are our future leaders here in Minnesota. Such great students you are. Thank you for sharing your perspectives, what you're seeing in class. As a reminder, we've been talking to, I'm going to say your names again because I want people to know who you are. Evelyn Sagor and Madison Lowe from Roseville Area High School, Jalela McCoy from Exploration High in Minneapolis, Ethan View, a PSEO student at Spring Lake Park High School, and Jackie Lee from Great River School in St. Paul. Let's thank them, everybody, with some applause. All right, so I do appreciate all the viewpoints that were shared today, and hopefully it will give parents and teachers and students, all of us, some ideas on how ethnic studies will look in our communities once it rolls out statewide here in Minnesota. And I appreciate everyone for taking the time to listen to this North Star Journey live discussion. We'll be back with another community-based conversation about what Minnesota's diverse communities need to thrive. Until then, stay safe, and thank you for joining us.